Good morning. I want to extend the welcome that Brother Jeff began us with, especially to those of you who are visiting with us. You might notice that our pews are slightly bare this morning, and that is because it's Father's Day. And every Father's Day, Sean Bain steals all our kids away and takes them to camp. And so it is not just for that reason that we appreciate you here helping us fill up our building, but it is certainly your presence is very welcomed and appreciated today. A friend of mine asked me, "So are you preaching on Fathers tomorrow since it's Father's Day?" And I'm going to paraphrase his response when I said, "Yeah, I'm preaching on Jephthah." And he said something along the lines of, "Well, that's weird." And I think you'll see why as we get into the book. Jephthah is not who you think of when you think about Father's Day, when you think about messages for fathers. Also, a lot of our fathers are absent this morning, so I thought about that as well. But I do think in the story of Jephthah is a powerful lesson, not just for fathers, but for all Christians, to reflect upon the stories of faithlessness, and also the picture of desperation and the desire to see change occur, and how in the history of mankind, and specifically in the history of people who claim to belong to God, there were moments of great failure, and yet moments when God was still working actively, trying to reveal himself. And I think all of that is housed and captured in the story of Jephthah. And so we're going to spend some time in Judges chapter 11 this morning. We started reading Hebrews 11 because it's real easy, I know that I struggle with this, to read these accounts and go, this guy is the absolute worst. I'm not sure that there is a single redeemable quality in all of this figure, and yet, as Nathan read for us in our Hall of Fame of Faith, God, through the Spirit, will mention Jephthah and saying that these are people whose faith commended them. And that is for us to wrestle with and struggle to see, what is it about this person that was so commendable? I might argue that really what we would wrestle with to see is, what is it about our God that can view even us in such terrible light as commendable through faith? And so hopefully we will see some of that. We will be able to connect some of the pictures of Jephthah in our minds to the greater overarching grace of our God, who even would see someone like him as worthy of being mentioned. So in verses 1 through 3, we're not going to read all of this. There's the entirety of the book of chapter 11 deals with this account. But in verses 1 through 3, we get an introduction to this figure. And I do think that as we think about who he was, knowing where he came from is one of the greatest pictures of seeing where his life went. So it says, Jephthah the Gileadite was a valiant warrior, verse 1. But he was the son of a harlot, and Gilead was the father of Jephthah. Gilead's wife bore him sons, and when his wife's sons grew up, they drove Jephthah out and said to him, "You shall not have an inheritance in our father's house, for you are the son of another woman." So Jephthah fled from his brothers and lived in the land of Tob, and worthless fellows gathered themselves about Jephthah, and they went out with him. Now, some things that we need to remember. All of this is not a new story from Judges chapter 10. When we looked at Judges chapter 10, you might recall that the people of Israel said, "God, the Ammonites are oppressing us, and we need help." And God said, "No. I will not deliver you. You all are constantly rebelling against me, and I am no longer going to help you out." But at the end of that chapter, he has this sort of this moment of repentance almost. He changes his mind. There's compassion that it seems in God's decision that he is going to offer some form of deliverance. So we had that story in chapter 10, and now it's almost as if that was really just foreshadowing things that were going to occur, and we're going to start seeing how it's going to play out through the story of Jephthah. But at the beginning of this, we're introduced to who is going to be our great deliverer, but we're going to recognize that his character is not one of great victory and not one of great honor, but instead is marked by a life filled with tragedy. And even from his very beginning, that he is a man who is brought into this world through the means of immorality. And so I want us to just consider a few things about him. Number one is that the character, his name, Jephthah, or you have in the Hebrew, it would be Jephthah, is literally clothed in ambiguity. His name means he opens. And it carries with it maybe the idea that he was the first child of his mother. But what's confusing is who did the opening? It could be that this was a name meant to honor the god or the deity that brought birth to this mother. But we're left wondering, is this discussing Yahweh? Or is this discussing El, which could have been used and in fact was used both to describe the God of the Hebrews, but also the God of the Canaanites? Could this be Baal? We're not really ever told within what is commonly in a name that gives honor to some deity. The deity's name will show up in the name, and yet in Jephthah's name, it does not. And so we're left not really for certain what to think about this name. And then as we continue on, we learn that his mother was a harlot, and so he's born into all of this immorality. And it gives you a little bit of depiction of his father then. What kind of man is this that has given birth to a child through the means of harlotry? And then as we go a little bit further into that, we discover that the children even that he sires through his actual wife, they give us a questionable sense of what sort of morality and ethics that they have been raised in when they will take their half-brother and run him out of town, essentially, to ensure that he doesn't get to share in their inheritance. They are motivated by greed to say, no, you can't have anything that belongs to us because you're not truly part of us. And yet we also see some things about him that would seem somewhat redeemable. In fact, he's mentioned as a valiant warrior. And you might think back, we've heard that before. Gideon is called a valiant warrior. And yet Gideon was called a valiant warrior by God while he hides in a wine press. Jehoshaphat, that's the wrong name. Jephthah, and I tell you what, just side note, typing Jephthah over and over again in a document is not fun. That is a weird word to spell. So Jephthah gets the name valiant warrior not by God who says, I can see what I'm going to do with you. But he gets that designation because he has been living amongst worthless fellows. It is likely that we're, think in your mind marauders, think in your mind ruffians, people who are going out and doing all sorts of maybe evil and wicked things, and he has shown himself to be powerful and strong and mighty. He can go and he can take care of business. So this is a guy that on the surface we might look at and go, okay, there are some redeemable qualities about him. He's got a bad history. He comes from a family that is just filled with questionable decisions. But when it comes to a time of war and we feel oppression, this is our guy. This is who we go to. Except who is it that's going to go to him? As we read on in the story, it's going to be the very people that threw him out of his home. This is going to be the people of Gilead. It's going to be the people who said, you don't need to be a part of us, that are going to have to go to him and say, will you come and will you get us out of this problem that we are in? Will you help us out with the situation that we now find ourselves in with Ammon? So let's read that, verses 4 through 11. It came about after a while that the sons of Ammon fought against Israel. And when the sons of Ammon fought against Israel, the elders of Gilead went to get Jephthah from the land of Tob. And they said to Jephthah, come and be our chief, that we may fight against the sons of Ammon. And Jephthah said to the elders of Gilead, did you not hate me and drive me from my father's house? So why have you come to me now when you are in trouble? The elders of Gilead said to Jephthah, for this reason we have now returned to you, that you may go with us and fight with the sons of Ammon and become head over all the inhabitants of Gilead. So Jephthah said to the elders of Gilead, if you take me back to fight against the sons of Ammon and the Lord gives them up to me, will I become your head? The elders of Gilead said to Jephthah, the Lord is witness between us. Surely we will do as we have said. Then Jephthah went out with the elders of Gilead, and the people made him head and chief over them. And Jephthah spoke all his words before the Lord at Mizpah. Now, when you read that, verse 4 suggests that the problem that arose in chapter 10 is what is caused all of this conflict, and it's caused this moment where a family member that has been cast out is suddenly brought back in. A child that is not one of us, who's different from us, and we don't want to have anything to do with him. We throw him out, but now we're going to drag him back because we need him now. We need him to do something for us. And so they're going to bring him back. And I want you to note the similarities between how that occurs in chapter 11 and how that occurred also in chapter 10 with Israel and God. So I put some of these up here for us to kind of take a note of. So in chapter 10, verses 7 through 9, and in 11, verse 4, we see that the Amorites are bringing this oppression against Israel. They're putting all of this pressure on them and making things hard and painful for them. And what do in both cases? They go and find someone that they think can get us out of it. In verse 10 of chapter 10, they go, Yahweh's the one. We need to go to God and ask God to do something about this. In verses 5 through 6, Jephthah's the one. And note that in both cases, both in verses 11 through 14 and in verse 7, Jephthah and Yahweh respond exactly the same. They use sarcasm to say, you don't want to have anything to do with me. Why now? What makes you think that I should come back and help you? You have no desire for me at all. And I'll have you note in verse 7, the way that Jephthah describes it. You drove me out. Think about that with the similarities to how Yahweh responds to them and says, didn't I do these things before you in the past? And you forsook me, and you served others. So you have a similarity there, but then you also have a similarity in them not giving up. Say in chapter 10, verses 15 and 16, they still are saying, God, even though God has essentially said, I'm not going to deliver you at all, they're like, okay, when you do it, this is what we want. We're still going to have hope against hope that this is going to work out where you're going to actually hear our appeal to you and respond favorably. And in chapter 11, verse 8, they do the same thing with Gilead. You drove me out. We didn't really drive you out. We're coming to you now. We need you, Jephthah. We need you to help us in this. But again, verse 16, Yahweh says no. And then later has this moment of compassion where he says, I'm going to do something. Jephthah, on the other hand, says, what can I get out of this? How can I use you for my benefit? And I bring that up to note this. How unfaithfulness to God is reflected in unfaithfulness to man. The way that Israel treats their true deliverer, the way they treat Yahweh, is similar to the ways they treat their judges, their deliverers in the land. And just like they would tell God, we don't need you anymore. We're going to do things the way that we like doing them. We're going to live the way that we like to live until things get hard and they say, oh, no, God, we need you to come back now. We need your help now. They're doing the very same thing to Jephthah. We don't like you. We don't need you. You go out of here. But now things have gotten hard and they're saying, oh, Jephthah, you come back and you save us in this moment. Another difference between chapter 10 and chapter 11 is that they say in chapter 10, whoever will do this. Look at verse 18, chapter 10, verse 18. The leaders of Gilead, who is the man who will begin to fight against the sons of Ammon? He shall become head over all the inhabitants of Gilead. So he is going to be our ruler. He is going to serve as our king in Gilead. He will be our head. That's what we're going to do to the guy that will deliver us from Ammon. But did you note in chapter 11 where they started? When they told him to come back and fight in verse 6, they said, Jephthah, we've come to Tob, we've come to get you. We want you to come and be our chief. And that sounds very similar, except that the word that is translated chief there never is used to really illustrate some sort of ruler or king. It's a leader of the military. It's a commander, a general. They say, we want you to come and lead our armies. But what they've been telling everybody in Gilead is whoever will do this will be the president. He will be the king. He will rule everything. And then they go and they have to go get Jephthah, the guy that they really don't like. And they say, well, I'll tell you what, if you'll come back, we'll let you lead our armies in victory. And Jephthah says, no. You had nothing to do with me. I don't want to have any part of that. And they said, no, that's not what's happening. And know what, now, since our first ploy didn't work, if you'll come back, we will let you be king. And that's when Jephthah says, now we're talking. Now I'll do something with this. And I want you to I bring all that up to recognize this. Look at how desperate Gilead has become. We don't like this guy. Like, we look at him and go, he is a reminder of the poor decisions of our father. He is a reminder that there is one amongst us who he gets to share in what is ours, but he is not really us. He's not a part of our tribe. And we don't want him amongst us. And yet he is the only source of hope that we can find as we look around. We look around and we see him as the only one that can do anything about this. And so we're willing at first to go, no, we're not going to give him everything. But when it really comes down to it, we will give him whatever he wants to come in here and do this job for us. That's the picture of what's going on in Israel at this time. And something that is strange in the midst of all of that is they're using the name of the one who really can do something about all of this, and it makes it sound somewhat legit. As you hear this, and you'll hear them talk about the Lord giving victory, and if the Lord gives them into my hand. But I do want you to recognize that in this account, and in the references to Yahweh that are made in it, they're little more than political jargon that is taking place. The focus is very shallow on what God can do. We have focused on Jephthah being the valiant warrior. We have focused on establishing a new head, establishing a new chief, and then whenever we're really getting serious about that, we throw in the language of Yahweh's got to give the victory. But he is almost used as just a slogan or a catchphrase in this political bid for power. So then you get down to to the rest of the story, verses 12 through 40. We're not going to read all of this, but I wanted to break up some of it and note a few things that stand out about it. There's really three things that occur. And the greatest of them, that gets the most amount of time, is this communication with the king of Ammon. The narrator will spend 17 or 18 verses just talking about letters that go back and forth between Jephthah and the king of Ammon. And then we're going to talk about the victory, and that will get the least amount of time. And then we're going to talk about the great tragedy that occurs at the end of the book. And if you'll note in this communication with the king of Ammon, that Jephthah right away takes to this position. I'm head, I'm chief. Verse 12, he sends a letter to Ammon and he says language like, what's between you and me? Jephthah is the leader of a bunch of worthless fellows from Tob. He is not a king. He has no business speaking to kings, and yet he speaks immediately to the king of Ammon like, hey, me and you are on the same level. What is it between you and me? Why are you fighting against my land? I'm the king of this now, and you got to deal with me. He immediately takes to his role, and he tries to deal with this very diplomatically. And there's a couple things that stand out about the diplomacy of what's going on here. One, the king of Ammon is a true politician. He is spinning history in his favor like crazy. He says, you all took my land away from me. And you're like, well, that ain't true. But then he throws in all of this truth in it. When you came out of Egypt and you settled in the land, well, all of that stuff really did happen. And so he takes a little bit of truth and then he kind of molds his ideas into it to say, no, this is what happened. When you left Egypt, you came up here and you took the land that belonged to me between these rivers, and I want it back. And to his credit, Jephthah gives it's a brief, but it's a very accurate view of history. You're right. We did come out of Egypt. God led us out of Egypt, and he brought us here, and we took the land, not of the Ammonites, but of look at me forgetting words like crazy, of the Amorites. I didn't take the land of your children. We took the land of Sihon and Og and kings like that who are Amorite kings. They had land that ran between these borders. And part of the reason maybe that the Ammonite king was doing this is because Ammon really didn't have any good borders. It was just kind of like there, in this land. That's our land. Well, where does it go to? Well, I don't know. It's just there. That's ours. But then you come down here to Moab, Moab and the king of the Amorites. You come to these lands and they go, well, we have to the Arnon. Our border stretched to the Jabbok. We have defined boundaries that show this is our land. And so it may be, as with a lot of people at this time, a lot of the unrest that was going on and that would continue until the days of David and what was being accomplished and God promised when God said, I'm giving you land from this river to the sea, the Mediterranean Sea, up to the river Euphrates. I'm giving you this. He said, I'm setting boundaries. Everybody else is trying to do the same thing. And Ammon's no different. He says, I'm going to set my boundaries. But Jephthah says, no, that's not what happened. We came in, we took the land from the Amorites, and you know what? Not only is that not historically what happened, but let's get theological for a minute. Our God gave us this land. Yahweh brought us in and gave us this land. Why don't you just go take the land that Chemosh gave you? And there's two things that he does by this. One, he insults the king of Ammon, and it's probably not unlikely that he didn't know he was doing it, because Chemosh is not the god of the Ammonites. Chemosh is the god of the Amorites. They worshipped and served not Chemosh, but the god Milcom. That would have been the name of the god that the king of the Ammonites would have served. He would have recognized. So it would have been akin to someone coming to America and saying, all right, when our president stands up, when they come and they stand up, we're going to play not their national anthem, but the national anthem of some other country. And, we made a mistake. Nobody made a mistake. That was an insult. It's very likely that's what Jephthah's doing here. He's goading a little bit. Go get your God. Oh, that's not your God. Well, a God. Let them do something about this. It's also an insult to Yahweh. Whether or not he meant it as one or not is unsure. But Yahweh has told his people, the land that belongs to these people, to the Ammonites and the Amorites, the land that is theirs, I'm the one that gave it to them. And in fact, you're not supposed to mess with it unless I tell you to. So Deuteronomy chapter 2, the very beginning of the book of Deuteronomy, we see that. You'll see in verse 5, he starts talking about the instructions for them as they're going to be passing near these lands. He says, do not provoke them, for I will not give you any of their land, even as little as a footstep, because I have given Mount Seir to Esau as a possession. He says, look, I've given this land to these people. And as you go down a little bit, you start learning who. The Lord said to me, do not harass Moab, nor provoke them to war, for I will not give you any of their land as a possession, because I've given Ar to the sons of Lot as a possession. And then in verse 19, when you come opposite the sons of Ammon, do not harass them nor provoke them, for I will not give you any of the land of the sons of Ammon as a possession, because I've given it to the sons of Lot as a possession. God tells his people, I've given them that land. And now you have Jephthah, who speaks to the king of Ammon and insinuates, one, maybe as an insult, Chemosh has given you your land, but also raises Chemosh to the same level as Yahweh. And that maybe will become important later in the story, because Chemosh or Milcom or Molech, all of these different names for deities of the people of Canaan, all accepted worship in the same way. And that was through human sacrifice of children specifically. And so it may be that in his dealings with the people of Ammon and the people of the nations around them, that Jephthah has become a bit syncretistic in his view of the things that are going on. And my deity is Yahweh, and your deity is these other gods, and the things that they like are the things that my God might like as well. So as we go on, we see him have this conversation with the king of Ammon. He comes back and says, look, we got the land fair and square. It's not your land. Your God gave you your land. Our God gave us our land. The king of Ammon says, I'm not going to have anything to do with that. We're going to war. And we get 17 verses dealing with this communique, and then you get 5 verses dealing with the battle. It is almost completely overlooked in the grand scheme of this story. There's almost no attention given to the things that it says, other than to some that stand out. Number 1, the Spirit of the Lord is involved. Jephthah is going to have the Spirit of God come upon him. That doesn't get said for every single deliverer. That makes him stand out along with ones like Gideon. The Spirit of the Lord came upon him, verse 29, verse 32. The Lord gave Ammon into his hands. God delivered his people. And this might draw our attention back to chapter 10. I will not deliver you. But then at the end of chapter 10, he has this moment of compassion where he says that he has decided that he is going to deliver them. And so we finally see it happen, just like that. But in the midst of all of this is the second thing that stands out, and it has nothing to do with the actual victory and everything to do with the character of Jephthah as they go to the battle. And he's having this conversation not unlike Gideon, who says, how do I really know I have your favor, God? How do I really know you're gonna do anything for me? Although up to this point, God has said nothing to Jephthah. He's told Gideon, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. Gideon says, how do I know? He has said nothing to Jephthah, but Jephthah's like, all right, God, you need to prove to me. So if you give me victory, look at what he says. If you will indeed give the sons of Ammon into my hand, then it shall be that whatever comes out of the doors of my house to meet me, I will offer it up as a burnt offering. I not only think that this is a depiction of the faithlessness of Jephthah, and we oftentimes talk about the rash vow of Jephthah, that he didn't think this through. I don't think that that's necessarily true. I think Jephthah did think this through. I just don't think that Jephthah had in mind who he was going to be sacrificing. I'll just put it that way. Because when you look at this, sometimes we try to change things up a little bit. We try to say Jephthah really intended that if God was faithful to him, when he got back, if his prized cow showed up, if his prized goat showed up, no matter how valuable it was, if the best thing came out of his house, he was going to offer that to the Lord. And lo and behold, when he gets home, it's his daughter. And he just never saw that coming. I don't believe that to be the case. And here's a few reasons why. Number 1, if it was talking about if he was talking about a goat, or if he was talking about some form of an animal, the Hebrew word that's translated as whatever would be a neutral word. It would have a neutral tense to it, but it doesn't. It has a tense that implies that it could maybe more accurately be translated as whoever instead of whatever. But also, what animal did he think was going to come out of the doors of his house? That's a weird place for animals to be. Maybe Jephthah just really did live in squalor, and it wasn't uncommon for his goats to share his bedroom with him. But it seems to indicate that 1, he expects whatever he's going to sacrifice to be in his house and come out, and 2, greet him. Come up to meet him with purpose. With all that in mind, I think Jephthah fully intended to offer a human sacrifice the entire time. And this goes back to his use of the god Chemosh in reference to him, and the syncretism that seems to play a part, where he is taking things from other beliefs and kind of melding them into his belief. Yahweh, if you will give me victory, I will do for you just like their king would do for their God. Because right now the king of Ammon is saying the same thing. If you will, Milcom, if you will give me victory, I'm going to offer you burnt sacrifices. He's talking about people. They would have been making the same things. So Jephthah is very likely treating Yahweh like the gods of the land. And that's what brings the tragedy that has capsulated at the end of this story. As you get down and you look at verses, really you start looking at verse 34. We find that there was victory and God gave them the sons of Ammon. The sons of Ammon were subdued. But when Jephthah gets home, it's not whoever it was that he had in mind. It's his daughter that comes out to meet him. And she comes out rejoicing. She comes out with excitement that her father has come home in victory. And we discover that one, she's his only child. He has no other son or daughter besides her. And so this implies that Jephthah's story is ending if he goes through with this. He tells her that you have brought me very low. He says, you are among those who trouble me. I have given my word to the Lord and I can't take it back. And there's a sense in that where we go, wow, there's maybe some honor. And that Jephthah says, I have made a vow to God. And when you make a vow to God, you keep that vow serious. And so the daughter says, you have to do what you've said you will do. She leaves for this period of 2 months and she weeps because of her virginity. And then verse 38. And in the Hebrew, verse 38 is interesting because there are other parallel accounts of human sacrifice in the Bible. Namely, we think of Abraham and Isaac. And when you think about that, God tells Abraham, big difference between Jephthah saying, I'll offer up my daughter, and God saying, offer up your son. But God tells Abraham, this is what you're going to do. And the narrator tells us, then Abraham got up early, got his son, got some servants, hiked to the mountain, took the wood, built the altar, laid the wood, laid the son, grabbed his knife. It's incredibly detailed. But here in the Hebrew, it's 5 words. There's only 5 words given to this account. It's almost as if the narrator can't even bear to tell the story of what's going on here. Those 5 Hebrew words essentially are, then he did her vow which made. It's like, how can I say this as succinctly and move on as possible? Jephthah offered his daughter as a burnt sacrifice. I want you to note something, though, about what I said about the honor of keeping your vow. He had 3 options here, and only one of which we see him choosing. One option is, I made a vow to the Lord, I have to keep that vow. Another option is, I can break that vow and I can live as accursed before my God, but my daughter will live. My daughter will get to go on. I will have children. I will have a lineage. I will have a family. All of that will continue. But I will stand accursed before God. But another option is I can do what God said to do when you make a vow that you can't keep. In Leviticus chapter 27, God is speaking about when you have vowed the lives of others and then you can't keep that vow. He's not talking about burnt offerings here, but if it would apply in these lesser situations, it would certainly apply in a greater situation. If I have vowed my son to the temple, but all of a sudden I have to have my son helping me on the farm. He has to help me make a living and take care of our family. You can come out of that vow. And depending on the age of the child and depending on the sex of the child, all it took was a monetary offering to the temple. You give some silver, you give some shekels to the temple. For Jephthah's daughter, most likely this only would have cost him 10 shekels of silver. And he either did not know the law well enough or did not care enough to part with 10 silver shekels to save her life. And I think part of that is depicted maybe his attitude towards that. When all of this happens, he doesn't blame himself. He doesn't throw himself on the ground and say, what have I done? He looks her in the eyes and says, you have troubled me. The one who is about to be the victim, this is your fault. Why did you come out of the house? And that is where the story of Jephthah ends. And now you understand why my friend says, what a weird thing to preach on Father's Day. But there are some lessons I think come from this. And the first one is this: we need fathers. where is Gilead in all of this? Gilead makes a poor decision at the beginning of this account, and he gives an offspring through a harlot. He does not live as a godly father should. But where is he later in his life? Where is Gilead when his sons are casting out his offspring? Jephthah is my son. He may be your half-brother, but he is my son. And you know, inheritances, they don't go through the mother's side. It doesn't matter who his mother is. He is my child. He is rightful heir to part of this inheritance. Gilead is nowhere to be seen in this account. Gilead doesn't stand up and say, sons, you're not living as you should live. He doesn't show up and say, sons, I did not live as I should live, but do not continue my mistakes. Nowhere in this account do we see a picture of a godly father leading his family. When fathers refuse to be fathers, that's what the story of Jephthah talks to me about. When fathers refuse to be fathers, it leaves lasting impacts. And that is not to note the power and the presence of the mother. You can go to Timothy and you can look at Lois and Eunice and the impact that they had when a father was very likely not teaching his son how the things of the Lord. Timothy's father was Greek. He was very likely not teaching him about Yahweh. But Lois and Eunice made it their work, and look at the impact that had on Timothy. This is not to say this is not commentary on the great power of women and of mothers, but it does highlight that God created fathers and put them in the lives of their children for a purpose. And when they refuse to live up to that purpose, it has a devastating impact. So today, I hope that that's what we take from this lesson one, is that fathers, we need to see our importance. And we need to see our impact. We need to see our responsibility that we have in shaping the future generation and the future people who one day are going to have to stand before God and give a defense for their lives. And we have a responsibility to help prepare them and shape them for that. The other thing that I learned from this is that no matter what you may think about the world that we live in, the culture that is around you will impact you. It will have an impact on your life. And I think that maybe I can illustrate that this morning. If during this lesson, I just occasionally worded in a few words that maybe we wouldn't label them straight as curse words, but they would maybe raise a few eyebrows. Like, I didn't know Kyle talked like that. And every now and then, I just kind of took the Lord's name in vain as I went through this lesson. And then towards the end of the lesson, I started to sprinkle in those words, and we know the ones, they're the ones that you really can only get away with in a rated R movie. You know, these words that maybe you can squeeze one in a PG-13. But those words started coming out of my mouth. And then as an illustration, I brought up a man and a woman, and I had them start to kiss in front of you. And then they started to remove their clothes, but it's okay, you only saw their backs. At what point would you be saying, not in here? You don't talk like that, and you don't show stuff like that. That is not something that happens in a place like this. But on our TV screens, and in our movies, and on our phones, we can say, well, you know, you have to look the other way. You kind of got to filter out all the language, but it's pretty good. Do not think that the culture will not have an impact on you. The culture not only impacts us, it impacts our children. And we should not be surprised when Christians speak harshly to one another. We should not be surprised when we hear mothers and fathers talk about how, I can't even stand to be around my kids right now. We should not be surprised when kids mouth back to their parents and display the same sort of anger and rudeness that they see their parents using to one another. They just throw it right back at mom and dad. We should not be surprised when we see the world being reflected from us, because culture has an impact. What we should do in those moments is recognize who we are. Everyone around Jephthah probably was not shocked that somebody could offer up a child as a burnt offering. Kings of Israel will do that later. But they should have said, that is not who we are. We are the children of God. And He has shown us that all life is important. He has shown us that His worship, it looks like this. He has called us out of slavery and out of darkness and out of places that lived like that to be different. Brethren, that should be our recognition too. That God has called us out of the culture. It should not shock us when we see its impact on us, but it should jog to our memory that we have been called to something higher, to something holy. And then lastly, we should learn from this that God often uses the unexpected. Jephthah, from the start, was rejected by his people. He was an outcast. He was the son of an illicit affair. He spent his life surrounded by the outcasts of society. He was unexpected. And yet God uses him to deliver His people. Overlay that with Jesus. It was said by those in His world that He was born from sexual immorality. He was rejected by people. He did live as an outcast. He was surrounded by the outcasts of His day, those with no worth. And God used Him to deliver mankind from their sins. That was unexpected. And as people today, we need to remember God uses the unexpected to do what humans can't do for themselves. Sometimes we're a desperate people. And when we get desperate, we'll look to whoever will make that deal that we think will get us where we want to be. Sometimes we do that in politics. Sometimes we do that with the president. We get desperate, we see the world's not what it should be, and we start feeling the pressure and the pain of prices that are going up and a world that looks morally like it's falling down. We get desperate and we say, who will make the deal? Who will be the one that we just say, you'll turn things around? Jephthah shows us the picture sometimes that when desperate people choose someone, that someone doesn't always turn out to be who they thought they were going to be. In the next chapter, there's a lot of people from Ephraim, a lot of God's people who are going to die because of this man that they have made head over them. But we don't always do that with politics. We do that with our entertainment. We do that with TV and video games. We do that with sports. We do that with hobbies. We do that with affairs. We do that with alcohol and drugs. We do that with all sorts of things. We get desperate and say we need something, and there's always something there that says, I will be the answer to your desperation. The last thing I hope you'll remember is that point there. God uses the unexpected. Because what God offers us to deal with a marriage that's falling apart. My spouse is not who they're supposed to be, and I don't think they're ever going to be who they're supposed to be. What God offers us when the world feels like it is against us and nothing is going the direction that we thought it should go. What God offers us when we are bored, when God offers us when we are empty, is a lamb that was slain. an only child that was sacrificed. But it doesn't end a generation, it doesn't end a lineage, it creates a family that relies upon him as deliverer. And he is faithful to not be a tragic deliverer, but to be a deliverer of hope. If we can help you this morning in recognizing our great deliverer, Christ, if we can help you in coming to him to lean upon him in your desperation as you reflect upon your sin and you reflect upon the weight of a world that is crushing you because of your life apart from God. If we can help you in coming to him to see how he can bring you in, how he can fulfill you, how he can give you hope, how he can deliver you from your sins. Or if we can help you in seeing that the culture and the life around you has drawn your attention back away from your deliverer, back to those things that he called you out of. Won't you please come forward, and we'll talk about those things together as we stand and sing.